Hey guys, and welcome back to my writing channel. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite aspects of my current work in progress. This is a video that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. I've had it written down in my notes app as a possible topic, and I've kind of just added stuff here and there to my sort of generic notes. I don't actually script any of my videos. I just kind of write bullet points of things I want to talk about so I don't forget important things, ideally. But I wasn't really sure I had enough to say about it, and I kind of wanted to wait until I was done with my revisions or almost done with my revisions before I broached this topic in case something, I don't know, drastically changed in my work in progress. But it hasn't, not drastically anyway, in this aspect. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of the concept, not the plot. It's not to be confused with the plot. The kind of basis of my story is that I have a girl from our world who goes to a fantasy world for a kind of study abroad type of program. I've talked about this a little bit in a past video when I gave you a little bit of details about the concept, and I don't remember how much I really even got into the plot, but I definitely did talk a little bit about this. There are tons of stories, obviously, that feature a person from the regular normal world who goes to a fictional place, a fantasy world, but specifically the aspect that I really wanted to emphasize in this was the kind of moving abroad, living abroad sort of normality in a way. So instead of it being like a surprise, like she's transported to a different place and doesn't understand, it's a different place in the same way that a different country that you might move to already exists. You can research about it, you can learn the language, you can learn about it through books, through the internet, in videos and things like that, and you can study about this place, but actually being there, living there, and moving there is a completely different experience. And that's really what I wanted to emphasize in this, and really what I wanted to do with this story. There's a lot more in the plot, obviously. Once she gets to the world, things happen, and problems ensue, as they must for a good book. You have to put your characters in some very uncomfortable situations, but throughout all of those plot elements, obviously you have the basic concept of this girl trying to discover this new place where she's going to be living for a year. I've kind of separated it into different categories of how my personal experience living abroad and what I have experienced and loved as an American who lives in France currently, but before that I moved to the UK. That was my first living abroad experience. I lived in Spain for 2 months. So I've lived in 3 different places that are not my home country, and so I've experienced that in different ways for different lengths of time in each one. Each experience has been very different, but I'm using kind of all of those to write the experience of my main character, Eliana. In developing the characters of my fantasy world, I have definitely based that off of my experience of going to different places, moving abroad, and being around the people from those different places, but also other people who might be kind of transplants in those places as well. Because every place that I've lived, I've been around a lot of people who are not from that place. So actually, we have similar yet still different experiences if we don't come from the same country. The same kind of thing has gone into how I'm developing the different people in this world. Eliana, my main character, she goes to an academy, and that academy is one of a few academies that invite students from all over the world, the fantasy world. So there she meets people who are from the nearby region, who have kind of a different way of life. She meets people who are from very remote regions, and every one of the regions, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in world building, but every one of the regions has their own culture, their own traditions, their own languages even. So all the people that she's around, the characters that I've developed, are a little bit different and reflect different aspects of the varied culture within my fantasy world. This goes for how they look, how they dress, how they speak, their accent or lack of accent. On top of all of those layers that I've created for the world itself, you also have Eliana, my main character, and that's who I'm filtering everything through. We're seeing everything through her lens, and she is completely new to all of it. So it's not like we're just, as a reader, dropped into the middle of this world with its different, stereotypes and backstories and history and cultures. But then you have someone who, for her, everything is new. And so she's taking her regular world, normal world background and then trying to navigate this new place. At the same time, something that I really wanted to resonate in my story, and I really hope I've done a good job, we'll see when I have beta readers read it, but I wanted to kind of emphasize that despite all of these differences and the many sort of mishaps that happen because of, Eliana trying to figure out how to navigate this new world, there's also a lot of familiar too in the world itself, but also in the people. Eliana is reminded of her friends that she left back at home. Despite the fact that she's in a foreign world and she's completely out of her element, at the same time, there is familiar there too. And I think that's really, really reflective of the living abroad experience. Next, of course, we have to talk about world building. That's the most obvious one, and I didn't start with it specifically because I didn't want to start with the most obvious, but you know, living abroad, you're in a different place. It's not just the people, it's the things and everything basically around you. One of the elements that I really wanted to be in my story, and I will see how much more I'm going to integrate this in the story, but that's languages. I have more than one language in my fantasy world, despite the fact that I have not actually sat down and, you know, written the dictionaries for all these languages. I'm not Tolkien. I don't want to be Tolkien. As it is, I only have just a few things that have names that are supposed to be from different languages, but I haven't actually written even phrases or anything in different languages. I don't know if I'm going to. I might. We'll see. But I definitely wanted languages to be present, even if I don't actually step over into the linguist realm and write in different languages and have sentences and conversations in different languages. I wanted them to be present, and I wanted to definitely reference them and the fact that, you know, different people speak different languages and the languages work differently in the different parts of the fantasy world. For example, I have multiple different regions, and in some regions they speak their traditional language only a little bit, or it's fading away completely and they're basically just speaking the common language that, you know, everyone is speaking together, which I'm writing in English, so obviously it's English, but I don't call it English, it's just the common language. Then there are also places where the regional languages are very important. It's what everyone lives their day-to-day life in, but they also speak the common language because they have to be able to communicate with the different people from the different regions. So those people, for example, have accents when they speak the common language. So Eliana actually notices that person has an accent, that person doesn't really have an accent, or that person has a little bit of an accent but can't quite tell why. It's a result of whether or not they speak that language at home, or that they speak it a little bit, or whether they really just only speak it with like tourists from different parts of the fantasy world. Languages are just a really interesting thing for me, so I wanted to make sure that in this story they were present, even if, like I said, I don't actually create dictionaries and construct my own languages. There are a lot of foodies out there, I know, and I love food as well. Food's definitely one of my favorite things about traveling and moving abroad and experiencing the different kind of norms for food, not just the traditional food that you get when you're on vacation, but just kind of how grocery stores work and all of that. So I have incorporated it a little bit into my story. I'm not sure how much I want to, because actually there were a couple scenes, I think 2 of the little parts that I ended up cutting in revisions had to do with trying new foods, and I put them in there because I really wanted them in there, and now I'm not so sure they work, but I have saved them in a different document because I might put them back in somewhere. I just have to figure out where it's natural and where I can take a tiny little detour for food. We'll see. But it's something I did think about, and I even have a little short scene where my main character, where Eliana goes to a supermarket so that she can kind of have this experience. Travel and transportation and trade, those were all things that I also thought about, and I'm continuing to think about throughout my revisions, because I actually gave myself a huge challenge that I did not quite fully think through when I had this concept originally and thought, oh, this would be a really fun book idea, and then I developed it from there. And one thing that did not occur to me when I first decided to do this was that when you have the real world and the fantasy world, and you have a system of studying abroad in place, so people from the regular world can go to the fantasy world and vice versa, how does that look in like a long-term system? Because this fantasy world needs to be different and needs to be new, and at the same time the real world's going to pick up things in the fantasy world and vice versa. So I had to think a lot about how I wanted to build this fantasy world, because it's not locked off from our world, but at the same time it's different and it's separate, and actually the travel between the two places is quite locked down. So it's not like people can just go like you would book a plane ticket, you know, in regular non-2020, 2021 days. Before that time, when you could just book a ticket for anywhere and go, it's not like that. It's much more locked down, so it's not quite as free and open, but at the same time these two worlds have been in contact with each other for a long time. So I had to think a lot about how I wanted to build the fantasy world in a lot of aspects, in how they did or did not pick up things from our real world. A sort of general way that my own living abroad experience is also affecting this book is just in how my main character navigates this new place. She does a lot of research before she goes because she has this fascination with this place, and then when she gets there she finds a lot that she expected, a lot of course that she didn't expect. She finds things that she knew about and expected, but when she actually encounters them it's completely different from how she imagined it. She finds things that are very familiar to her just from her everyday life, and is surprised and sometimes not surprised. Sometimes you just kind of take things for granted that are like what you've been used to. I'm trying to base all of this sort of experience off of what I've experienced myself. Not line for line or anything, because obviously the experience is way different from me moving from the US to the UK or from the US to France. You know, it's gonna be very different in a fantasy world. I'm just using the way that I saw the world when I, you know, moved to a new place, the way that I took things in and experienced things, noticed things, the fatigue of when, you know, you notice so much those first few days, you just want to lie down and, you know, kind of bubble off for a little bit because it's just so much at first, even if you're super excited and definitely want to be there and love what you're seeing. So yeah, the overwhelm and the underwhelm of moving abroad is something I've experienced more than once, and it's definitely something that I am having my main character experience, and I think I wouldn't be able to do it in the same way if I hadn't actually lived abroad myself. So in that way, I'm actually just super excited to be writing this. That's, you know, like I said, it's one of my favorite aspects of my concept. There's a lot of other aspects in the book. You know, like I said, the concept is not the plot. They do not equal each other. That's just kind of the very basic framing for my plot that all happens inside this frame, but it's something that, you know, affects Eliana throughout the entire story, so it's something that keeps kind of coming back. There are probably a lot of other things that I could talk about, but I'm gonna stop rambling for now, and I'm gonna stop and drink my chai tea because it's been sitting here getting cold. Those are kind of the main things that stick out to me when I think about how living abroad is definitely a theme in my book. It's something that continues to come back, and it's sort of just always there, even if it's not directly in the plot or directly in a character or a characterization. It's there still. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions for me about my book or how living abroad, maybe specific elements of living abroad or moving abroad are present. I will answer to the best of my ability without giving anything away. I will be recording an update shortly about how my revisions are going. Hopefully they are on their way to being done, at least the first draft of revisions. I am so excited to be finishing this and closing this chapter and then starting more revisions probably. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and definitely subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more videos about this book or other books that I might write in the future, or what I'm reading, or tropes that I like. Basically just writing and books. That is what we do here on this channel, so make sure you're subscribed if you want to see more, and you can also turn on notifications if you want to be notified as soon as I upload new videos. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another writing video.